The lectionary brings us this morning to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, starting with verse 32. Jesus said, "Do not be afraid, little flock. Do not be afraid, little flock. For it is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give alms. Make purses for yourselves that do not wear out, an unfailing treasure in heaven, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Be dressed for action and have your lamps lit. Be like those who are waiting for their master to return from the wedding banquet, so that they may open the door for him as soon as he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds alert when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will fasten his belt and have them sit down to eat, and he will come and serve them. If he comes during the middle of the night or near dawn and finds them so, blessed are those servants. But know this, if the owner of the house had known at what hour the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." Will you join me in prayer? Gracious God, open our hearts and minds to your word for us this day, to renew and re-energize us. Let the light of your love shine through us to be a blessing for your world. In your holy name, amen. Since the beginning of this year, for some reason, I've found myself nearly every morning with my first cup of coffee turning to a few online newsletters to try to gain perspective on current events that otherwise scare me pretty much silly. In one newsletter called Today's Edition, Robert Hubble consistently urges Americans of conscience to keep showing up publicly and loudly for democracy. Yesterday, Saturday's edition, he issued a plea for discouraged people to hang in there, even when reasons for optimism seem scarce. This is what he wrote. "In the last 6 months, I have repeatedly offered the same advice. Whatever you do, don't quit. Take a break if necessary. Go on a news fast. Reduce the number of newsletters you read or the broadcasts you watch. Just don't give up. Come back as soon as you can." The Gospel of Luke gives us a pretty similar message in today's reading, except maybe for the part where Hubble says, "Take a break if necessary." Jesus doesn't say that. The essential message is, whatever you do, don't quit. Jesus told his listeners to be like servants keeping watch overnight for their master to return from a wedding feast. There's an urgency to his description of the situation, an urgency to the waiting, to staying ready. He says, "Be dressed for actions, gird your loins, keep your lamps trimmed and burning." His audience included his disciples and the local crowds who followed Jesus in his teaching ministry. That audience lived in historic Palestine under the heavy thumb of Roman occupation. And the Christian audience that Luke wrote for some 50 to 80 years later also lived under persecution, a tiny minority subject to oppression. They all waited and watched for a better time, and many of them expected Jesus to be the one to bring that better time, and soon. In the first part of today's text, Jesus has already urged listeners to get their priorities straight, to treasure moral values more than property, to serve others rather than build up material wealth, What I love about this particular story in Luke is that when the master does return in the wee hours of the morning, when sleep and inattention would have been most tempting, the servants who are still alert and actively watching get a completely surprise gift. The master girds up his own loins. He takes his clothing in so that he can become a server. He sits them down at his own banquet table, and he serves them a feast. Jesus seems to be saying this waiting promises something so good, it's worth staying alert and ready. And for us, has there been any time in our lifetime when we needed a message of hope and promise more than we need it today? When the very fabric of our government and community feel like they're being torn apart and we don't know what to expect? When the time being feels urgent, with no assurance of when or how relief will come? For at least the last 10 years, I have to admit, in those times when nothing about current reality looks hopeful or promising, I have looked to my friends in Israel and Palestine for clues about how to keep it together to work for a better day. Many of you know that I've traveled frequently to Israel and Palestine. Ever since I retired in 2018, I have been more free to talk or to move and talk, but I worked until 2018 for 10 years for a nonprofit called Pilgrims of Ibilin. Ibilin is a village in northern Israel, and a set of schools there was founded by a Palestinian priest. My work was to support those schools. And in the course of supporting those schools, I had the opportunity also to take at least 20 groups of tourists, American travelers, to visit not only the schools, but other holy places in Israel and in Palestine in the West Bank. I had never been to Israel or Palestine before I took that job, but since then I've been there about 30 times and have, as I said, taken about 20 groups. We called those tours Living Stones tours. And we not only visited holy sites, but we met with local Christian and Muslim and Jewish peacemakers on both sides of the Green Line. In October of 2023, as Plymouth people know, 25 of us from this church were preparing to fly to Tel Aviv for one of those tours. But October 7th intervened, and the horrific attacks by Hamas on Jewish communities around Israel, or around Gaza, and the start of Israel's retaliatory war on Gaza canceled our plans. By half a year into the war on Gaza, I desperately wanted to travel back there to check in with friends and to offer solidarity, even though bringing pilgrimage groups was still pretty much impossible at that time. Well, it still is, actually. So for 3 weeks in May of last year, I did go back. I went to Bethlehem, to a farm just outside Bethlehem, to volunteer. The farm is owned by Palestinian Christian friends. It's completely surrounded by Israeli settlements that are aggressively expanding. Jess Allmeyer from our church and 2 other friends went with me, and we had 2 purposes for traveling. First, we went to volunteer on the farm, and they needed volunteers. It's not as safe for local Palestinians to work on a Palestinian farm surrounded by settlements. So we were there to cut weeds and feed animals and water trees. But we also went to be a protective international presence to help keep Israeli settlers from attacking the farm because they wanted to turn it into yet another illegal Israeli settlement. During our time on the farm, we watched as radical settlers from the closest settlement to the farm literally paved a road and planted containers or small RVs just outside the fence line of the eastern boundary, obviously preparing for something to come. It was easy to see that international guests on the farm are actually essential to help keep the farm from being lost to aggressive settlers. And so I went back again in the fall for another 3 weeks. And I went again this spring for 3 more weeks. I'm going again in October. About 6 months ago, I was invited to preach in this church, and I got to share at that time some of our experiences from visiting that farm, the Tent of Nations, and tell stories of the Lutheran family whose guiding principle is, we refuse to be enemies. I also described some of the extreme difficulties imposed by Israel on Palestinians throughout the West Bank through practices and policies that a Jewish Minnesotan, Jeff Halper, has described as a matrix of control. Jeff grew up in Hibbing. He graduated from McAllister. He got a PhD from UW-Milwaukee, but he has lived his whole adult life in Israel, where he founded the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. In several books and through his work with ICAD, Jeff describes how life for Palestinians in the West Bank is circumscribed by a number of limitations, by checkpoints and restrictive travel permits and IDs, by the isolating 700-kilometer-long separation barrier, also known as the apartheid wall, by severe limits on access to water and electricity, and by separate sets of roads that provide excellent highways for yellow-plated Israeli cars going to and from settlements, and inferior, often inconvenient Palestinian-only roads for white-plated West Bank cars. In the name of security, Israel's military conducts frequent night raids on Palestinian homes to arrest people, often teenage boys, whom they suspect of considering harmful actions. And in an ironic twist on security, the military often protects violent settlers as they attack Palestinians to steal and destroy land, to take homes, cars, animals. The goal is clearly to drive Palestinians to abandon their homes and to go anywhere else as long as it's not still in Palestine. During 2025, this year, things in the West Bank have gone from very bad to truly terrible. As just one recent example, 3 times during the month of July, the only remaining 100% Christian village in the West Bank, Taibe, has been brutally attacked. A 1,600-year-old church was set on fire in Taibe. And when the fire failed to destroy the church, settlers brought cows to graze inside the sacred walls of that sanctuary. On July 28th, settlers returned and burned the homes and cars of 2 young local families, destroying not only their homes and security, but their livelihoods as well. Palestinians live with daily anticipation that any mundane detail of their lives can and often will go badly. The setbacks they endure can range from inconvenient to humiliating to life-threatening. I have never seen my Palestinian friends have to dig so deep for hope. They share stories almost every day of things that seem so degrading that nothing worse could possibly happen, and then it does. More times than I can count over the years, I've been with tour groups where someone asked our Palestinian host, "How do you keep going? How do you stay hopeful?" Our hosts consistently respond, I don't have the luxury of not hoping. As people of deep faith, despair is not an option. One of my best teachers about hope has been the Reverend Dr. Mitri Rahab. Mitri was the pastor of Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem when I first met him, and he's now the president of a highly regarded and fully accredited university in Bethlehem, Dar el-Kalima University, a school that grew out of his church's outreach ministries after the 2002 siege of Bethlehem. Mitri's motto since I've known him has been, "Hope is something we do." He's also the author or editor of more than 30 books on theology from a Palestinian perspective. I turn to one of my favorites, his 2004 book titled Bethlehem Besieged, Stories of Hope in Troubled Times. In it, Mitri makes the case that true hope is a powerful and critical concept for those living amid conflict. Hope moves us into a state of empowerment where one starts planning and strategizing, reflecting on how to resist effectively and creatively. In a chapter titled Building Walls or Planting Olive Trees, Mitri writes, "Holding to a hopeful vision in the context of war gives hope a new meaning. It's no longer something we see, but rather something we practice, something we live, something we advocate, something we plant. If we plant a tree today, there will be shade for the children to play in. There will be oil to heal the wounds, and there will be olive branches to wave when peace comes." Had our Plymouth group been able to travel to Palestine and Israel in 2023, we would have all come home with a new close friend, Usama Nikola, who would have been our guide over the 2 weeks of our pilgrimage. I'm lucky to count him not only as a dear friend, but really as family. We've led close to 20 pilgrimage groups together over the past 15 years, and in the last month, Usama has launched an online newsletter on a platform called Patreon to share his reflections on life in Bethlehem and the challenges he faces as a Palestinian Christian. Because life in the West Bank is so hard and jobs are so scarce, Usama has watched as dear friends and even his brother's family have emigrated to live elsewhere in parts of the world where it's easier. Usama uses his updates from Bethlehem to share heartfelt reflections on why he stays and where he finds hope. He wrote this on July 14th. "God is not the creator of evil and suffering," he called this entry. Here in Bethlehem, where hope and heartache walk hand in hand, I often hear the question, where is God in all this pain? It's a question whispered by mothers burying sons, by children standing at checkpoints, by communities living under siege. Let me be clear, God is not the author of this suffering. God did not create evil. The God I believe in, the God of Bethlehem, is not distant or indifferent. God is in the weeping, the resisting, the rebuilding. God is with the family whose home has been demolished. God is in the priest in Taibe, the mother in Gaza, the youth planting new olive trees where old ones were burned. God is not causing the suffering. God is enduring it with us. There is evil in this world, yes, but there is also an unshakable presence of grace. God moves through compassion, through courage, through the global voices demanding justice for Palestine, through every act of solidarity that says, "You are not alone." Let us remember, Usama says, God is not behind the bombs. God is in the brokenhearted who will choose to live and love. God is not the destroyer. God is the healer, the comforter, the one who still whispers, "Do not be afraid." He concludes, "Thank you for standing with us. Your presence, your prayers, and your support remind us that even in the valley of shadow, we are never alone." My heart is broken nearly every day as I read news coming out of Gaza and the West Bank. And then again, as I watch news of distressing developments in our own country. But my heart is also lifted every day if I remember to stay alert and watch for signs of God's presence in family and friend relationships, in this Plymouth church community so persistently seeking a faithful way forward, in music that lifts my soul, and in nature, literature, and so many other surprising stories of grace, sources of grace. My prayer is that even when God seems absent, when waiting feels hard and hope feels distant, we too will find opportunities to practice hope in all we do. Amen.